Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl, aka Artsy Island Girl for Pajama Crafter Stamps. Today I'm going to share an easy light up card. I'm going to be using this Bundle of Wishes layering die set for my light up feature, as well as the Mix and Match Celebration Sentiments stamp set. This has so many different choices in it. I'm also going to be using a sheet of printed paper from the Winter Parade printed paper pack. And to create the light up feature, I'm going to be using some twinkle lights from Pear Blossom Press. These are very easy to use, so it makes it really easy to create a fun interactive card. They come with batteries. When you take the battery out of the package, there's a little plus sign. There's also a little plus sign where it inserts. You make sure those line up and you're good to go. So I have those ready to go once I'm ready for them. This sheet of paper with the gifts on it is from that Winter Parade paper pack, and that's what I'm going to be using for my background. There's also some striped papers in that pack too if you want something that's a little bit more subtle, but I just thought these gifts with this candle die just matched perfectly. I'll also be using part of a sheet from the Metallic Medley pack. It is silver, it's reflective, it's holographic, and there's several different prints. This is going to reflect the light behind my candles, but we'll get to that in just a moment. The first thing I want to do is position my candles on the background of my card. So I have a piece of that printed paper that is trimmed to 3 3/4 inches by 5 inches. I have a piece of sage cardstock that is 3 1/4 inches by 1.5 inches, and that's going to be my cake at the bottom, and I'm going to put my happy birthday sentiment on it. Once I have the placement of that candle die, I'm going to tape it in place with some Best Ever Craft tape and die cut it out of that background. Once we have that done, I'm going to glue in some acetate in that opening. So this acetate piece is only really going to be visible in the candle flames, but because we have the whole candle cut out of there, I want something to glue my pieces to, so I'm going to glue it over that whole background. I'm using some Barely Art glue in a fine line bottle to add glue all around the outline of that, plus those little slivers that go between the candles. I have a piece of cream colored cardstock die cut with that background die set of those 2 layering dies. I'm going to cut off the flames of those candles and just glue the inside part in, or the bottom of the candles in. The reason I'm doing that is because those little slivers there, I want to make sure they're glued down right and they haven't shifted. They're really, really tiny with really tiny joins to the rest of the cardstock. So by gluing this solid piece back there, I can make sure everything is positioned properly. And I'm going to use that Barely Art glue to glue that as well. I use that Barely Art for pretty much anything. I want to say like 95% of the things I glue together are done with that glue. That is going to take a few moments to dry, so I put my acrylic block over that and set that over to the side. And while that's drying, I'm going to stamp and emboss my sentiment on my cake. Now I chose this sage cardstock to do my cake. You can do whatever color you want. I chose colors that matched that printed paper in the background, and I chose to keep my cake really, really simple because we already have that printed paper in the background and then our candles, and I didn't want it to get too busy. So I left it as a simple piece of cardstock and heat embossed my happy birthday sentiment on there. So I'm using the happy and the birthday sentiments from that Mix and Match Celebration Sentiments stamp set. I used a little bit of embossing powder tool on the cardstock before stamping it with Versamark ink. Then I will pour on some super fine gold embossing powder and heat emboss that sentiment there. I thought another thing I think would be nice on this would be to put a little bit of confetti on there, but again, I didn't want to get it too busy. You could also do a little bit of ink blending around the edges if you wanted to frame it in a little bit more. So once I have my sentiment heat embossed, I thought those corners were a little bit too stark. So I used a corner rounder around the top 2 edges just to kind of round those corners and soften it a little bit. It also coordinates a little bit better with those gifts in the background. Now that that is done, my background is almost dry, but I realized that I needed to cut out that little tiny bit at the top of the cake for those candles. Otherwise, I was going to have it covered with the cake and I didn't want to have the green showing through my top layer of my candles. So I matched up my die with that background. It was really easy to do. It just slides right into the grooves of those die cuts. I taped it onto that bottom part or the top part of the cake and then die cut that. So that will slide right in there perfectly and it'll look like the candles are right on top of that cake. Once I have that ready to go, I can start layering the different layers of my candles up. Now for the 2 top layers, I have one cut out of yellow cardstock. That's going to be the flame to the candles, and the bottom part of that candle we're not actually going to see because we're going to put this red cardstock die cut out of there. I wanted my candles to be red to coordinate with the reds in the printed paper of that background. You could, if you wanted, cut flames off the yellow piece, glue them in, and then cut the candles off the bottom piece and glue those in. But it's easy enough to line them on top of each other. It also adds some dimension to the front of the card. Once I have those down, I'm going to glue my cake to that card front piece. And because we took the die and cut those candle pieces out of the top of there, it's just going to fit right in there like a puzzle. So the only thing I'm concerned about is that it lines up at the bottom and it's nice and even. Now we're going to take that holographic cardstock and I'm going to use a Copic marker to color it yellow. This way, when it reflects the light, it has more of a yellow glow to it rather than the silver of that holographic cardstock. I'm using a Copic marker here. You could also use alcohol ink if you wanted it to be a darker yellow, but it tints it enough to create a yellow glow from those candles. The Copic marker will have a more subtle look and an alcohol ink will have a lot more color to it, so you'll see it a lot more. You only need a piece big enough to go behind the opening of those candle flames. So I don't need to do the entire piece of cardstock. I want to say it was about 1 inch by about 2 inches. You want to make sure to cover the background behind those lights. So once that's done, I can set that over to the side. And I have a stamp and die set that coordinates with those twinkle lights, the light up feature, and it has some action stamps to it. I'm using the one that says press here, and I'm using a circle die to cut that out. I stamp it with some Rustic Wilderness Distress ink. If you don't have a stamp and die like this, you can easily just write press here on the trigger or the button for that light up feature. Another option would be to put, say, a gem or something in the area where that button is, and then put a post-it note on the inside of your card, letting someone know that there's an interactive feature and what to do with it. That's what I did before the stamp and die set. Now, before I glue that little button down, I want to glue my battery pack for my lights where I want it on the card. So I'm using some score tape. Any strong tape, a glue dot will also work for this. And then I'm putting it where I want my button to go. You need to have a strong tape to make sure that it stays in place. And once I have that taped in place, I will press around to know exactly where that button is, put a little pencil mark, and then add a little bit of that glue to press my little action button right on there. And you can see as I'm creating this that I regularly will be pressing that button, making sure that the lights are all working properly and that nothing has gone awry. It's always easier to fix things while you're in the creating stage than having everything completely finished and then realizing that you made a mistake. With those little wires from the lights, I am going to position them right where those candle flames are. And this is why I chose the twinkle lights. There's also lights that have this same design to them that don't actually twinkle, but I thought for candles, the twinkle would be perfect. I'm using a little bit of Best Ever Craft tape to tape those pieces in place. This way I know that when I'm gluing my card together in just a moment, I'm going to have those lights and those wires all in place. Everything's going to be working properly and nothing's going to have gone and moved in an area where I don't want it to go. So the first thing I do is position each one of those lights right at the base of the flame of the candle. And then I take a little bit of extra Best Ever Craft tape and just tape those wires down, making sure that they don't go in front of the acetate to be shown with the candle and they don't go outside that printed paper. I have some huge foam squares here. These are double thick. You want something that's thicker than the battery pack for those lights, and these are perfect for it. I only need 4 of them to cover that background, cover all 4 corners, and make sure that I have enough dimension to cover that battery pack. So I put those in the 4 corners, and now I'm ready to assemble the rest of my card. I have a piece of dark green cardstock here that is trimmed to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. I'm going to glue that to my base, and I chose to do a sage colored base for the base of this card, just for something a little different, but a white card base would also work well here. So before I glue my front piece to the base, I want to take that little tiny piece of holographic cardstock, make sure it's placed behind my candle flames. So I put that piece on top, put that cardstock behind there and make sure that it was positioned properly, then glued it to the green base. Now, if you don't have that holographic cardstock, you could just use a piece of white cardstock behind there. That is also going to reflect the light. I just wanted something that was not that dark green because the dark green is going to make those flames look a little bit darker. After gluing that holographic piece down, I glued my printed piece down and then used a Copic marker to color in the wicks of the candles. This is a step that you don't necessarily need to do, but I think it finished it off nicely. And I always love adding a little bit of extra texture. So for the flames of my candles, I used a little bit of glossy accents on there. When you use glossy accents, it starts off as a milky whitish tone, but it dries completely clear. It adds some gloss and dimension to those candle flames and really lets the light catch them. And then I added stripes of stickles to the candles themselves. Again, they don't add any color. They're Stardust stickles. They just add some sparkle, and it really helps everything catch the light. This is the finished card. It's got so much fun dimension to it with those candles, with the texture of the stickles and the glossy accents. And I always love interactive cards and how they just give cards a little bit of an extra wow factor. You'll find all of the products I use from Pajama Crafter Stamps linked in the video description. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate all the time that you spend with us. We will see you soon.